There is a moment right before something good happens, and the body flinches. Not in the excitement before good news, the tightening behind the sternum, right when it is actually arriving. You have been trying to be lucky the same way you try to deserve it. The oldest understanding of fortune knew one thing: luck does not choose. It finds the one who is open. You were never unlucky. You were overprotected. Something in you learned to return the good before it could be taken. And beneath that protection, something older, something that was never interrupted, has been waiting. The real question has never been whether luck is available to you. It is why. Every time it arrived, some part of you handed it back. Part anew. VHE Arshite Kur Of Lusky. Chapter anew. Hot Hells Seek AC2 Alley Ice. There is something worth honoring before we go any further. You have tried. That is not a small thing. You have done the work, or something that looked like it. The visualizations, the gratitude journals, the affirmations written on paper and spoken aloud into mirrors. The books that promised to explain the gap between what you were asking for and what was arriving. The practices that held for a few days and then quietly stopped holding. You tried those. And then you tried something slightly different, and that also held for a while, and then also stopped. None of that was wrong. None of it was wasted. But there is something that none of it addressed, and that something is precisely what this is about. Every strategy you have ever used to attract luck has been a sending strategy. Think about that for a moment. Visualizing is sending. You are projecting an image of what you want into the field of what you are hoping to receive. Affirmations are sending. You are broadcasting a statement about who you are or what you deserve. Gratitude practices, in the way they are usually taught, are sending. You are generating a feeling of appreciation and transmitting it outward, with the implicit understanding that the universe responds to gratitude by giving you more things to be grateful for. Sending. All of it. And this is about something different. This is about what happens on the other end. Because here is what nobody has said clearly enough. The field is already broadcasting. Luck is not waiting for you to want it hard enough, or phrase your desire correctly, or raise your vibration to the appropriate level. The broadcast is constant. The signal is dense. It is moving through you right now, the same way a Wi-Fi signal moves through the walls of a building. Indifferent, abundant, indiscriminate. The question has never been whether the broadcast is happening. The question is, what determines whether you receive it? Imagine a city at night. You are high enough to see it. All of it. The light stretching to the horizon, the density of life packed into those blocks of glass and concrete, and passing through all of it, through every wall, every body, every space between bodies. Information. Signals. Data moving at speeds the body cannot perceive. Radio waves carrying voices and music. Digital information constituting entire conversations, entire relationships, entire businesses. All of it invisible. All of it present. All of it moving through the same air you are breathing right now. The signal is not stronger in some buildings than others. The information is not choosing who to reach. What varies between buildings? What varies between the building that can receive a particular signal and the one that cannot is not the broadcast. It is the receiver. The building without the right equipment does not receive the signal. It does not mean the signal is not there. It means the receiving apparatus is not configured to catch it. The signal passes through. It continues. It reaches the next building. And the next. And it reaches the building that has the right equipment. And it lands. This is what the luck field looks like. Not sparse. Not selective. Not stingy with its offerings. Dense. Constant. Indiscriminate. What varies is not the broadcast. It is the receiver. This distinction between the broadcast and the receiver is the entire architecture of what we call luck. Everything that follows in this audio builds on it, returns to it, deepens it. And the reason it matters so much, the reason it is worth establishing before anything else, is that every strategy most people use to become luckier focuses entirely on the broadcast side of the equation, on wanting better, sending better, asking more precisely, visualizing more clearly. None of those strategies address the receiver. And the receiver is where everything actually happens. So let us be precise about what luck is. Not the folk definition. Not the feeling you get when you find a parking space right when you need one, or when you happen to meet the right person at the right party. Not luck as event. Not luck as the universe randomly distributing favor like a pinata burst open over a crowd. The distinction that matters is this: being lucky, episodic, external, event-based, versus being in luck, structural, internal, relational. Being lucky is something that happens to you. It is discrete. It occurs, and then it ends. You got the lucky break. You happened to be in the right place. And then it was over, and you went back to whatever your normal was. And you waited for the next lucky break to arrive or not arrive. Being in luck is something different. It is a continuous state, a relationship with the field that is ongoing rather than occasional. Not a series of lucky events strung together. Something underneath the events that makes them more likely and makes them compound when they arrive. The people you watch and call lucky are, most of them, not experiencing a higher frequency of lucky events. They are in luck in the structural sense. And the difference between episodic luck and structural luck is not how often good things happen. It is what happens after each one. This leads to something that needs its own space, the receiving layer. The receiving layer is the part of your system, not metaphorical, not mystical, functional, that determines what actually lands when something good arrives. It is the equipment in the building. It is the thing that is configured, or not configured, to catch the broadcast. The receiving layer is not your beliefs. It is not your conscious intentions. It is not the affirmations you say in the morning. It lives below all of that. It lives in the body's habitual response to arrival, in what happens in your nervous system in the milliseconds after something good begins to enter your experience. We will spend a great deal of time with the receiving layer. For now, the important thing is simply to know it exists and to understand that it is the variable that most luck advice has never addressed. Here is the other piece of the architecture, and it requires its own term: the resonance floor. The resonance floor is the baseline your nervous system returns to regardless of events, not your mood, not your emotional state on a given day. The floor, the unconscious level beneath the mood, that your system treats as normal, as expected, as what reality actually is. The resonance floor is not set by your beliefs. It is not set by your intentions or your affirmations or what you consciously think about your life. It is set by your history of receiving or not receiving, by the accumulated experience of what has actually happened, not what you hoped would happen, not what you believed was possible, what arrived. And here is the critical piece. Until the floor shifts, belief does nothing. You can believe completely and sincerely that you deserve good things. You can do the work, feel the feelings, write the journal entries. And if the resonance floor has not moved, if the unconscious baseline that your body treats as normal has not shifted, the belief floats above the system without ever reaching it. The floor stays where it is, and the luck stays episodic. This is why the work that has come before this has not held. Not because you did it wrong, because it was operating at the level of belief, sending, while the actual variable, the receiving layer, the resonance floor, remained untouched. Now consider what this means for the architecture of luck. Luck compounds when it is held, when something good arrives and is fully received, not processed and returned to baseline, but held long enough to settle into the system and raise the floor. The next reception becomes easier. The raised floor makes the body more naturally oriented toward what is arriving. The more naturally oriented body notices more of what arrives. The more it notices, the more it receives. The more it receives, the more the floor rises. Compounding. The same principle as interest on a loan, only in the other direction. The lucky person is not someone to whom more things are given. The lucky person is someone whose floor has risen high enough through held receptions that the compound effect has begun. And the unlucky person, or more precisely, the person who has been living below their natural resonance floor, which is almost everyone who feels unlucky, is not someone from whom luck is withheld. It is someone who receives and returns, who gets the lucky event, processes it, and settles back to whatever the floor was before. Nothing compounds. The luck stays episodic, and from the inside, it feels like starting over every time from the same place. The question that Chapter 1 cannot fully answer, that it is only opening the door toward, is this: why? Why does the floor stay where it is? Why, if reception is theoretically possible, does something keep interfering with it? Why do the lucky breaks not compound for some people in the way they do for others? The answer to that is older than the strategy, and it lives somewhere the strategy has never reached. But here is what this does not yet answer: why the floor is where it is. Why, if reception is possible, something keeps interfering with it. The answer to that is older than the mechanism, and it lives somewhere the understanding we have built so far cannot reach on its own. We are about to go there. Chapter TWO. VHE, Lusk Deftian Mechanism. Chapter 1 gave you a language. It gave you a framework. And right now, in this moment, having heard it, most people feel something clarify. They feel the recognition of something they suspected but could not name. And that recognition brings with it a particular energy, the sense that now I understand, now I can change it, now I know what to work on. That energy is real. And it is also, in this moment, slightly premature. Because what Chapter 1 described, awareness, expectation, the receiving layer as a concept, is still the surface. It is a more accurate surface than most luck advice reaches, but it is still the surface. And the reason that people who genuinely believe in all of this, who have done the work, who have read the books and felt the recognition and tried to apply it, the reason it still does not hold for them is that the deflection lives below mindset, below belief, below conscious attention. It lives in the body's memory. If the mechanism were simply awareness and expectation, then the people who are most aware, who have the strongest expectations, who have spent the most time thinking about and working with these ideas, would be the luckiest. And they are not, necessarily. Some of them have spent years in the study of manifestation and attraction and still experience consistent luck gaps, still feel the proximity without the arrival, still feel something almost working and then not quite landing, because they are working at the wrong level. Awareness is not the issue. The body's response to arrival is the issue. Let us go to the level where this actually operates. The moment something good arrives, a good piece of news, an unexpected opportunity, a moment of feeling completely, genuinely fine, something in the nervous system runs a calculation. Not a slow, deliberate, conscious calculation. A fast, pre-conscious, automatic one in milliseconds. Before the mind has finished processing what the event even is, the body has already calculated the cost of receiving it. Not the cost in practical terms, the cost in vulnerability terms. The body asks, in its own wordless language, what does it mean to receive this fully? What am I exposed to if I let this land? And what it calculates as cost. The ledger it runs without your permission or your awareness looks something like this. First, the vulnerability of hoping. If I receive this fully, I am exposed to losing it. The more fully I receive it, the more it will cost me if it is taken. Better, then, to hold it loosely. Better to not fully arrive in it. Better to keep one part of myself outside of it, watching, ready to absorb the impact when it ends. Because it will end. They always end. And the one who did not fully arrive in the good thing suffers less when it goes. Second, the exposure of being seen as fortunate. This is subtler and more socially complex. To receive luck fully, to claim it, to name it, to live as though you are someone things go well for, is to become visible in a particular way. And visibility has historically been dangerous. Envy can arrive, resentment, the withdrawal of sympathy from people who prefer you needy, the pressure to maintain a level of fortune that feels precarious. Better, the body calculates, to keep the luck quiet, to downplay it, to not fully inhabit it so that the target it creates stays small. Third, the fear of the takeaway. This is the most common form and perhaps the most recognizable. Something good arrives, and the first conscious thought, if it reaches consciousness at all, is something like, "This is too good. Something bad is coming." The universe balances. There is always a catch. I should be careful about how much I enjoy this, because the enjoyment itself might be the thing that tips the balance and brings the corrective. This is not pessimism. This is not a character flaw. This is a deeply learned pattern that made sense in the context in which it was learned. It is the body saying, "I have received things before that felt this good, and the aftermath was painful. I am protecting you from that pain by managing your exposure to the arrival." Fourth, the cognitive dissonance of receiving better than the resonance floor allows. If the floor is at a particular level, if the body's baseline sense of what is normal for you has been calibrated by years of experience, then receiving something that exceeds that level creates a kind of internal pressure. Not excitement. Pressure. The sense of being outside the range of what is supposed to happen to you. And the system, loyal to its calibration, works to return you to the range, to bring the floor and the arrival back into alignment, usually by diminishing the arrival rather than raising the floor. The result of all four of these calculations, which happen simultaneously in milliseconds below awareness, is what we will call the deflection reflex. Return it before it can be taken. The body has learned this response so thoroughly, has run it so many times over so many years, that it activates before the mind is finished processing what arrived. The luck comes. The deflection fires. The luck passes through. And the mind, arriving slightly late to the scene, finds only the familiar sense of almost, of close, of the specific tiredness of watching something arrive at the edge of your experience, and then not quite entering it. This is not pessimism. This is not a mindset problem. This is an old protection. Something, at some point, often early, often in small moments rather than catastrophic ones, taught the body that receiving came with cost. That luck was conditional. That good things had a catch. The protection that grew up around that learning was wise. Given the information available at the time, given the environment in which the body was operating, the deflection reflex was the right response. It reduced exposure. It managed risk. It prevented the particular pain of full reception followed by abrupt loss. It was wise. Once. It is no longer serving the function it was built to serve. But the body does not know that. The body is extraordinarily faithful to its history, and it runs the old protection in new situations, not because it is confused, but because it has not yet been shown that the situation is different. Now there is something worth introducing here, a term that captures what accumulates from years of operating the deflection reflex: frequency debt. Frequency debt is not a deficit of effort. It is not the result of not wanting enough or not working hard enough. It is a deficit of alignment. Every luck event that was deflected, every arrival that was returned before it could land, every good thing that was received incompletely and then processed back to baseline, created a small frequency debt. The good that was available and did not land, accumulated over months and years. Frequency debt creates the felt sense of proximity without arrival, the specific exhaustion of being close, the private suspicion that the gap between you and lucky is structural rather than circumstantial. It is not structural in the sense of permanent. It is structural in the sense of having been built. What has been built can be understood. What can be understood can be worked with. There is also another term worth placing here: signal interruption. Signal interruption is the moment the deflection mechanism fires. Not a wall, nothing that dramatic, not a ceiling that luck hits and cannot pass through. Something more precise than that. A break in reception. The broadcast is happening. The signal is there. And in the moment of arrival, the receiver drops the signal. Not permanently. Not completely. Just for the duration of the deflection reflex, which is often only a second or two. But in that second or two, the luck that was arriving does not land. It continues. And what remains in the body is the afterimage of almost. You have felt this, not as a thought, as a sensation. Something arrived. A good email, an unexpected offer, a moment of your life feeling genuinely fine in a way that you had not expected to feel. And something in your chest contracted. Not excitement. Not the open expansion of receiving. Something closer to bracing. A subtle pulling in. A quality of held breath. As if receiving fully were, on some level, a kind of danger. That sensation is not anxiety in the ordinary sense. It is not negativity. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you or that you are self-sabotaging in some conscious, willful way. It is the deflection mechanism. Precise, automatic, doing exactly what it was designed to do. And it is workable. Because it is visible. Because it has a name. Now, let us go deeper into the specific shapes this takes. Because the deflection mechanism is not one size fits all. It has particular forms, and recognizing your form is one of the most useful things you can do with what this chapter is offering. The first form is preemptive diminishment, before the luck can be taken away. Before the other shoe can drop, before reality can correct the good event and restore the normal. You take the luck yourself. You reduce its value before anyone or anything else can do it for you. It sounds like this. It is probably not as good as it looks. Something will go wrong with this. I should not get too excited. Let us see how it actually plays out before I start feeling good about it. I have been here before, and it did not work out. This is the most socially acceptable form of deflection. From the outside, it can look like wisdom or maturity or a reasonable resistance to being naive. The person practicing preemptive diminishment often presents as grounded, realistic, not the kind of person who gets swept up in false hope. There is even a kind of social reward for this form. People appreciate someone who does not oversell the good news, who keeps their enthusiasm measured, who seems to know that life is complicated and good things often come with complications attached. What is actually happening is that the receiving layer is closing before the arrival is complete. The luck is entering the experience and the body, running the preemptive diminishment protocol, is setting the value of the arrival to something manageable before it can be set to its actual value. The arrival is real. The value is adjusted downward in real time. The luck lands at a fraction of what it was, and the resonance floor barely moves. The second form is the sabotage of arrival. This one is harder to see because it looks, from the inside, like a series of unrelated choices. Luck lands, fully, undeniably, in a way that even the deflection mechanism cannot immediately process and return. An opportunity arrives that is too clear to dismiss. A relationship develops that is too real to diminish. A success occurs that is too visible to preemptively reduce. And then, something happens. Not a single dramatic, self-destructive act. A series of small choices, each of which seems individually reasonable, that together create the conditions for the luck to not hold. You say something that undermines the relationship. You do not follow through on the opportunity in the way that would be required to make it real. You spend the money before it has a chance to compound. You make yourself unavailable in exactly the way that makes the success harder to sustain. From the outside, this can look like laziness or carelessness or some deep-seated desire to fail. From the inside, below the level where the conscious mind operates, it is completion. The wound gets the ending it expected. The luck arrives and then departs, which is what luck has always done, which is what the body knew would happen, which confirms the resonance floor and its calibration. This is where the term abundance membrane becomes useful. The abundance membrane is the threshold between proximity and arrival, the line between almost having the good thing and actually having it. For some people, the membrane is thin and permeable. Luck crosses it easily and lands fully. For others, the membrane has thickened, usually from the inside, through years of deflection. It is not that luck cannot cross. It is that something in the system, loyal to the old calibration, acts to return what crosses before it can fully settle. The sabotage of arrival is the abundance membrane doing its work. Not maliciously, not even consciously. Loyally, faithfully, returning the system to what it knows as home. The third form is the attribution error. This is the most sophisticated form, and in many ways the most insidious, because it looks the most like intelligence. Luck arrives. The receiving layer actually opens. The body, perhaps on a clear signal day, perhaps in a moment of genuine presence, receives what is arriving. The luck lands. And then the mind steps in. Oh, that was just good timing. It would have happened to anyone in that situation. It was not really luck. It was preparation, or hard work, or circumstance. Anyone would have gotten that. I just happened to be there. The mind is trying to be accurate. It is trying to not be superstitious, not to be one of those people who attributes everything to mystical fortune and lives in a state of magical thinking. It is trying to be honest about the causal structure of the event. And in doing so, in locating the cause of the arrival outside the relationship with the field, it prevents the feedback loop from closing. Because the feedback loop that raises the resonance floor, that compounds luck, that creates the virtuous cycle of reception and attunement, that loop requires the luck to be recognized as signal response, not as coincidence, not as circumstance, as the field responding to the receiver being open. When the mind overrides the receiving layer's recognition and files the event as external circumstance, the loop does not close. The floor does not rise. The luck does not integrate. And the next situation begins from the same floor as the last one. Not because luck was absent, because the credit was not placed where the feedback loop required it. You may recognize yourself in one of these forms more than the others. That recognition, sitting with it, not performing anything around it, is itself a small act of reception. The knowing of the pattern is the beginning of its becoming workable. But here is what this does not yet settle. Why the form you recognize is the one you learned. Why the deflection mechanism took the particular shape it took. What it was protecting against, specifically, when it formed. And who, a long time ago, taught you that almost was safer than open. What would it mean if the luck that has been trying to reach you has been trying for longer than you know, not arriving at random, not bypassing you by accident, trying consistently, and finding something in the receiver that it could not quite pass through? The question is not why luck abandoned you. It never did. The question is why, every time it arrived, the door was almost closed. and who, a long time ago, taught you that almost was safer than open. Chapter 3. He consistency of he lusqui. You have watched them. You know the people I am describing. They may be in your immediate life. The colleague who seems to always catch the right opportunity. The friend whose relationships tend to work out. The person who enters a situation that seems exactly like the situation you were in and somehow extracts from it something different than what you extracted. Or they may be people you observe from a greater distance. The kind of lives you see evidence of and wonder about. The ones who seem to move through the world with something you recognize as luck, but cannot quite name as mechanism. It is worth looking at this closely. Not with envy. That is not what this is for. With curiosity. With the specific attention of someone who is trying to understand a pattern rather than possess an outcome. Because the first thing worth naming is this. What you observe as luck in these people is not, when you examine it closely, a higher frequency of good events. It is not that more things go right for them in an absolute sense. It is that what goes right for them does not stay isolated. It compounds. Each good thing seems to generate the conditions for the next one. The opportunity leads to the relationship. The relationship opens a door. The door reveals another opportunity that would not have been visible before the relationship, which would not have existed without the earlier opportunity. From the outside, this looks like an almost unfair cascade, as if the universe simply decided to be generous to this particular person and not to others. It is not that. What is happening is something more precise and more hopeful than divine favoritism. What is happening is that these people hold what arrives. Not consciously, in most cases, not as a deliberate practice of gratitude or as a technique they were taught. They simply, for reasons that have everything to do with their history of receiving and very little to do with their character or their spiritual development, they simply do not return the good before it can compound. And that difference, the difference between received and returned and received and held, is the entire gap between the episodic lucky break and the compound lucky life. Let us look at the pattern more specifically. Because it is not a mystery, it has observable features. The first thing you notice about consistently lucky people is that they move through the world with a particular orientation, not optimism in the motivational poster sense, not the forced brightness of someone who has decided to see the positive, who is working to maintain a good attitude, who is effortfully keeping their chin up. Something more fundamental than that. More structural. More preconscious. When they enter a room, the nervous system is organized around an assumption that the room is organized in their favor. Not necessarily that everything will go well. Not that they will get what they came for. Something more basic. That what is here is available to them. That the room, the conversation, the situation, whatever it is a place where something useful can happen. This is not a personality trait. It is a frequency setting. It is the resonance floor, high enough that the body's default orientation toward the world is open rather than braced. And the critical thing, the thing that distinguishes this from temperamental optimism, is that it is not dependent on things going well. The consistently lucky person does not maintain their orientation because their life is easy. Many of them have had lives that were not easy. They maintain the orientation because the floor is high enough that a setback does not pull the body all the way back to bracing. The floor holds, and the body, returning to that floor after the setback, finds itself once again in the open posture state that allows the field to reach it. The second thing, they receive luck without immediately undermining it. When something good happens, when the opportunity arrives, when the coincidence occurs, when the day simply goes well in an unexpected way, there is a pause, sometimes a very brief one, but a pause before the mind begins its cataloging of everything that could go wrong, everything that might be temporary, everything that could be taken away. In that pause, even if it is only a few seconds, the luck registers. The body is still in the event. The receiving layer is open. The floor moves slightly. The compound effect begins. Most people do not have that pause. Or rather, the pause exists, but it is occupied. The moment something good arrives, the mind is already in the consequence. Already planning around the luck, already half expecting the correction, already working out how to not be too hopeful in case it does not hold. The pause is filled with activity. And in a pause filled with activity, the floor does not move. The third thing, and this is perhaps the most interesting from a mechanistic perspective, is that they read coincidence differently. What a person who feels unlucky files as coincidence, the consistently lucky person files as signal. Not as supernatural sign, not in any mystical sense. In the structural sense we have been working with throughout this chapter and the last. They encounter something, a chance meeting, a piece of information that arrives at exactly the moment they needed it, a door that opens from an unexpected angle. And instead of the mind stepping in and attributing it to chance or circumstance, something in the body registers it as signal response, as the field speaking. This is not superstition. It is a different attunement. The nervous system that is calibrated to receive from the field is also, naturally, automatically, more sensitive to its responses. It is not reading magical meaning into coincidence. It is recognizing pattern response at a level below the conscious mind's ability to intervene and explain it away. And here is the uncomfortable implication of all of this, the one that requires some steadiness to fully hear. You have had more luck than you have received. Not more than you deserved. Not more than you asked for. More than landed. Some of it arrived fully formed. A clear opportunity, an unmistakable coincidence, a moment when the field was offering something specific and real. And the deflection reflex returned it before the mind even finished processing what it was. Some of it arrived in disguise. The form of a door that looked like an obstacle, a setback that was also a redirection, a loss that was also a clearing. And the attribution noise prevented the recognition that would have let it integrate. Some of it arrived as almost, as the proximity that you have been living in, the specific closeness to the thing without the arrival. And instead of recognizing the almost as calibration, as tuning, as the field working on the precision of what you were being set up to receive, you cataloged it as loss. You filed it as evidence of not quite. And the almost accumulated into the weight you carried into this audio. This is not a moral failure. It is a calibration that needs adjusting. The actual question, not the question luck advice usually asks, but the one that addresses the actual mechanism, is not how do I get more luck? It is how do I stop returning what is already being sent? There is a term for where this stopping happens, the abundance membrane, the threshold between proximity and arrival. The line between almost having and actually having, almost receiving and fully receiving, almost compounding and compounding. The listener, the person who has been living in proximity, has been living just on the wrong side of that membrane. Not because luck is scarce, not because the field has decided something about them, but because the membrane thickens from the inside. Through the accumulated deflection reflexes, the frequency debts, the signal interruptions, the years of returning what arrived. No external strategy can thin it from the outside. The visualization, the affirmation, the attraction practice. These are all approaches from the outside. They cannot reach the inside of the membrane. They can only operate in the space between the strategy and the membrane, which is exactly where they have been operating, which is exactly why they have not held. What thins the membrane is what happens at the receiving layer. And the people you watch and call lucky, they are not luckier. They are more permeable. The field reaches them because something, consciously or not, through experience or through the accident of a particular history, has cleared whatever was turning the signal back. Their membrane is thin enough that luck crosses it naturally. The field does not favor them. It simply finds less resistance when it tries to reach them. That clearance is available to you. It is not a trait you were born with or not born with. It is not a spiritual gift conferred or withheld. It is a state of the receiving layer, and the receiving layer can change. But before we can talk about how it changes, before we can go to the layer where the thinning actually happens, there is something older and more fundamental that needs to be understood. Something that the oldest traditions about fortune knew before the concept was simplified into asking and receiving and the law of attraction. Something that changes everything that follows. Part TWO. THE Signal. Chapter 4. WHB Lest ACT Tuoli means. The word has been saturated. Blessed. You have heard it so many times, in so many contexts. The athlete who thanks God after a win, the social media post with the single-word caption over a photograph of a beautiful meal or a vacation view or a family gathered at a table. The phrase used so casually and so ubiquitously that it has become almost impossible to hear the word without also hearing its echo, its inflation, its distance from whatever it originally meant. The common understanding of blessed is something like chosen, favored, on the list of people to whom good things are given, as if there is a distribution happening somewhere, a cosmic allocation of fortune, and some people are in the favor of whoever is doing the distributing, and others are not. Blessed is what you call someone who is in that favor. It is a status, external, conferred. Either you have it or you don't, and the having or not having is not particularly related to anything about you. That understanding is not wrong, but it is incomplete in a way that has caused enormous confusion and an enormous amount of misdirected effort. Here is the older meaning. Before the word was formalized, before it was adopted into specific religious traditions and loaded with their particular freight across the many traditions that addressed fortune and favor and the alignment of a human life with the generative principle of the world, whatever each tradition called that principle, the word blessed described something specific. Not selection, not favor conferred from outside. Orientation, alignment, a quality of the inner life that put a person in resonance with what the world was offering. The blessed person was not chosen. The blessed person was attuned. The luck that followed the blessed person was not reward. It was not the universe paying out what was owed to someone who had earned favor. It was signal response. The field was always broadcasting. The person who was blessed was receiving. This is a fundamental reframe, and it is worth sitting inside for a moment. You are not blessed when something good is given to you from outside. That is luck as event. What we have been calling episodic luck. Good event, received or not, compounded or not, filed and returned to baseline. You are blessed when something in you is aligned with what the field is offering, which means you are able to receive it rather than deflect it. That is a state, not a status. And here is the most important difference between a status and a state. States can be entered. A status is conferred or not conferred. It is not something you enter. It is something you are assigned. A state is a configuration, a particular arrangement of the system. And the system can be reconfigured. You cannot earn a status. You cannot practice your way into being selected. But you can. And this is what everything in this audio is pointing toward. You can return to a state. You can clear the interference. You can open the receiving layer. You can raise the resonance floor. And in doing those things, you are not becoming blessed. You are returning to a blessed state that was already yours. That was, in fact, your original configuration before the interference accumulated. Let us make this concrete with an image. You have been in rooms where a particular kind of person was present. You may not have been able to articulate what it was about them, the quality of their presence. But something arranged itself differently in those rooms. Conversations that would not otherwise have happened. Opportunities emerged that seemed connected to their being there. Coincidences stacked in a way that would not have been possible in a different configuration of the same room. These people were not necessarily the most charismatic person in the room, not the most attractive or the most accomplished or the most strategically positioned. The quality was something more subtle and more fundamental than any of those things. A kind of settled openness, a sense that they were fully there, not performing presence, not managing impressions, but actually in the room in a way that made the room more itself. From the outside, what happens around such people looks like luck. The right person is always there when they arrive. The conversation always turns in a useful direction. The coincidences seem to know where they are. What is actually happening is alignment with the offering frequency. The room did not change for them. They did not change the room. They were permeable enough to receive what the room was already offering, what any room is always offering, to anyone present enough to receive it. The field was broadcasting in that room the same way it broadcasts everywhere. The difference was the receiver. Now, what does it mean for this state to be blessed beyond change? Most people experience luck as events, as we have said, things that happen. The parking space, the email, the coincidence that turned into the opportunity. In this framing, luck is entirely circumstantial. It depends on circumstances being right, and circumstances change constantly, which means luck in this framing is inherently unstable. You cannot hold it. You can only wait for it. The alternative framing, the one the title of this audio is built on, is that luck is a state. A continuous relationship with the field that makes good events more likely and that makes bad events less conclusive, less capable of lowering the floor all the way, less able to close the receiving layer permanently. In this framing, luck is not dependent on things going well. The relationship with the field is not contingent on the field currently returning visible results. The state persists through the silence, through the setback, through the dry period. Not easily. We will spend a chapter on the dry period because it is real and it is hard and it deserves honesty rather than bypass. But structurally, the state can hold. The beyond change part is the most important part. It is what separates the concept from positive thinking, from the law of attraction as popularly understood, from motivational approaches to luck that amount to. Feel better about things, and things will go better. The state of being blessed beyond change does not require things to go well. It is not a feeling about the future. It is a frequency in the present. The frequency of a receiver that is clear enough to catch what the field is broadcasting. Not because everything is fine, but because the clearing has happened at a level beneath what circumstances can touch. This is where the term original frequency becomes important. We will use it throughout what remains of this audio, so it is worth establishing precisely. The original frequency is not a new state you need to build. It is not something you achieve through work or practice or spiritual development. It is what you were before the interruptions, before the deflection mechanism formed, before the resonance floor settled at its current level, before the luck-worthiness wound, which we have not yet named but are moving toward, created the receiving layer you have been operating with. The original frequency is the broadcast you have always been capable of, the state of alignment with the field that was, in some sense, your starting configuration. Not something you need to become, something you need to return to. And what has felt like luck being absent, what has felt like the field not reaching you, or reaching others but not you, is not luck being absent. It is the original frequency being covered, not destroyed, not lost, covered by protection, by history, by the accumulated cost of almost. The frequency was never interrupted. Only the reception was. There is a signal beneath all the seeking. It has been broadcasting your entire life. Not sometimes, constantly. The question is not whether it is there. The question is what, exactly, has been preventing it from landing. Chapter 5. VHE Signal and VHE Noise. If the field is always broadcasting, and it is, then what varies between the person who is receiving and the person who is not the quality of the signal. It is the signal-to-noise ratio in the receiver. This is a technical concept borrowed from communication theory, and it is worth spending a moment with it before moving into what it means for luck. In any system that receives information, a radio, a satellite dish, a telephone line, a nervous system, what determines the quality of reception is not only the strength of the signal being sent, it is the relationship between the signal and the noise present in the receiver. A weak signal in a low-noise environment can be received perfectly clearly. A strong signal in a high-noise environment can be completely obscured. The noise does not have to be louder than the signal to interfere with reception. It simply has to be present enough to compete. The luck field broadcasts at a constant strength. What varies? What creates the felt difference between a clear signal day and a high-noise day is the noise level in the receiver. Signal, the original frequency. The quality of openness, expectancy, and permeability that makes reception possible. The state you are in when the deflection mechanism is quiet, when the resonance floor is high, when the receiving layer is configured the way it was before the accumulation of protective adaptations. Most people have felt this state in moments. They have called it flow, or being in the zone, or things just working, or a good day where everything seemed to line up. Those were not lucky days in the sense of the field offering more than usual. They were clear signal days. The noise was temporarily low. The original frequency was briefly accessible, and the luck that arrived in those moments was the luck that had always been available. Simply now reaching a receiver clear enough to catch it. Noise, the accumulated static, the patterns that interfere with reception. Not character flaws, not moral failures. Learned responses, protective adaptations that were built for specific situations and have been running in all situations since. The noise is not the enemy. It was once the solution. The noise is the collection of responses that the body assembled to protect itself from the cost of receiving. The deflection reflex in its many forms. The vigilance running continuously in the background. The preemptive diminishment. The attribution override. All of the patterns we named in Chapter 2. They are the noise. They are the static in the receiver. And they were, when they formed, exactly the right response to what was happening. The body is not stupid. It is extraordinarily intelligent in its protective function. The noise it generated was a response to a real signal. The signal that receiving has costs, that luck is conditional, that good things are followed by complications. The body learned from experience and built the appropriate response. The problem is that the response has been running for longer than the experience warranted. The experience that generated the noise has, in most cases, long since ended. But the body, loyal to its history, continues to generate the noise. And the noise continues to interfere with the reception that the experience no longer prevents. Let us name the noise sources specifically. Because the noise is not monolithic. It has particular textures, particular locations in the body, particular ways it presents in the experience of receiving. And recognizing your specific noise is the first step in reducing it. The first noise source is what we can call unworthiness noise. This is the most fundamental and, in most people, the most persistent. Its explicit form is the thought, I do not deserve this. But it rarely presents explicitly. More often, it is somatic, a tightening in the chest when something arrives that feels disproportionate to effort, a sense of internal debt, that receiving this much would require justification, would require having done enough to earn it. A voice, not quite conscious, that asks, what did you do to deserve this? The voice is not wrong to ask. It has a logic. It has been learning from an environment that conditioned good things on performance, on being good enough, trying hard enough, being the right kind of person in the right kind of way. It learned that receiving required justification, and it applies that lesson now in adult life, even in situations where no one is setting conditions. The body holds this noise in the chest and sometimes in the throat. There is a quality of holding there when something good arrives. A bracing, a subtle tightening, as if the body is preparing to defend the reception against the challenge it expects to come. You do not have to have done something wrong to feel this. You only have to have been in an environment, early enough, where the conditions on receiving were real enough that the body built the pattern. What makes unworthiness noise so difficult to work with is that it has been running so long it sounds like honesty. It sounds like self-awareness, like realistic assessment, like the sensible refusal to be grandiose. It does not sound like noise. It sounds like truth. It is not truth. It is history. The second noise source is vigilance noise. What is the catch? When does this end? I should not trust this yet. Let me see how this plays out before I allow myself to feel good about it. The nervous system that has been hurt by trusting good things, that has learned through experience that warmth is followed by cold, that arrival is followed by departure, that things that feel stable turn out to be precarious, is a nervous system running a continuous threat assessment, even when nothing is threatening, even when the current moment is genuinely fine. The assessment runs regardless because it has been set up to run regardless. Because once upon a time, stopping the assessment was what led to the pain. The body deploys this noise in the jaw, in the eyes, a quality of slightly narrowed attention, scanning, the opposite of the wide, open receptiveness that allows the signal through. There is an energetic cost to vigilance noise that compounds over time. The energy that should be available for receiving, for the open, present, permeable state in which the field can reach the receiver, is being used to run the threat assessment. There is less available for reception, and so less is received. And the vigilance has less evidence to work with that things are actually safe, and it increases. This is the loop of the unlucky, not bad fortune. Vigilance noise consuming the energy needed for reception, which reduces what is received, which maintains or increases the vigilance, which reduces what is received further. The third noise source is attribution noise. We named this in Chapter 2 as the attribution error, the cognitive override that prevents luck from integrating. Here it is, the noise version, the continuous, low-level narration that explains away what arrives before it can register as signal response. That was just good timing. It would have happened anyway. I was just in the right place. Anyone would have gotten that. It was circumstance, not luck. It is not really meaningful. Attribution noise is the intellectually sophisticated noise. It does not feel like protection. It feels like accuracy. The person running heavy attribution noise often prides themselves on not being superstitious, not being magical in their thinking, not attributing to cosmic forces what can be explained by circumstance and probability. And in the process of being that kind of accurate, they prevent the feedback loop from closing. The luck arrives. The receiving layer opens. The body begins to integrate. The attribution noise steps in and files the event as coincidence. The loop does not close. The floor does not rise. And the next event begins from the same floor. The noise is not bad thinking. It is often genuinely good reasoning. The problem is the timing. The attribution happens before integration is complete. The mind evaluates before the body has finished receiving. And the body, interrupted mid-reception, lets the arrival go. These are the three primary noise sources. You likely recognize one more than the others. That recognition, whatever form it takes in you, wherever it lives in the body, however it sounds in the internal narration, is itself information. It is the beginning of the signal becoming audible beneath the noise. Because here is what the noise anatomy reveals. When you step back from it, there was a time before it, a configuration of you in which these patterns had not yet been assembled, a state in which the receiving layer was open and the floor was at its natural level, and the signal from the field reached you without interference. That time was real. That state exists. It is not a future achievement. It is the original frequency, accessible beneath everything that has covered it, waiting not to be built, but to be returned to. And if you have ever had a clear signal day, a day when things just worked, when the noise was inexplicably low and the flow was inexplicably present, you have had evidence of that original frequency. You have felt it. It was not magic, and it was not accident. It was the noise briefly quiet and the receiver briefly clear. And the luck that arrived in that state was the luck that is always available to a clear receiver. You cannot manufacture signal. You can only reduce noise. This is the exact opposite of most luck advice. Every strategy you have ever been given to attract more luck has been an addition strategy. Add more visualization. Add more positive thinking. Add more gratitude. Add more clarity about what you want. Add more specificity to the asking. And none of it held. Not because the strategies were wrong in themselves, but because they were adding to a system that needed to subtract. You were increasing the broadcast while the receiver was still full of noise. And a loud broadcast through a noisy receiver produces more confusion, not more reception. The work is not to generate a louder signal. The signal is already louder than any noise you can make. The work is to quiet the interference enough to hear what has always been broadcasting. And beneath the noise, at the bottom of the quietest moment you have ever had, the signal was there. It still is. This is not a metaphor. The body knows what quiet feels like. You have been there. What comes next in this audio is about the specific reason the noise started, and why, without understanding that root, the quiet never holds. Chaper Hessex. The el Hugh were tinus wound. Everything covered so far. The deflection mechanism, the noise sources, the resonance floor, the signal-to-noise ratio that determines what the field can reach. All of it has one root. Not many roots. One. The root is not mindset, not belief system, not a thinking pattern that can be replaced with a better thinking pattern, not a habit of the conscious mind. It is an experience, sometimes a specific, identifiable one, more often a diffuse accumulation, a texture of experience spread across time, not locatable in a single moment, but present in the pattern that the moments built together. In that experience, or in that accumulation of texture, the body learned something. It learned that luck had to be earned, that good things were conditional, that receiving required justification, that showing up with open hands was exposure, and exposure was dangerous. This is the luck-worthiness wound, not clinical language, not a diagnosis, a somatic truth. The place in the body where the decision was made, however long ago, that receiving fully was not safe, that the open hand was a risk the situation did not warrant. The wound is not unusual. It is not exotic. It is not something that happens only to people who have had obviously difficult lives. It forms in ordinary circumstances through ordinary learning, and its ordinariness is part of what makes it so invisible, so persistent, so easy to overlook, so easy to mistake for honesty or realism, or simply the way things are. Here is how it forms. It is rarely a single event. Occasionally it is. An experience early enough and significant enough that it carries the full weight of the lesson by itself. But more commonly, it is repetition, a series of small, ordinary moments in which the conditionality of good things was communicated. Not deliberately, not cruelly, in most cases, simply communicated. You can have this if you are good enough. You will get that when you have earned it. Be grateful. Do you see what others do not have? Do not get too excited. You will jinx it. That was just luck. Do not rely on it. Luck does not last. Do not get too far ahead of yourself. These are not abusive statements. They are ordinary things said by ordinary people in ordinary circumstances. They are often attempts to protect, to manage expectations, to prevent disappointment, to keep the child from building too much on something that might not hold, and in the body of the child receiving them. The body that is not yet able to abstract and contextualize, that is learning what the world is by what the world shows it. These ordinary moments accumulated into a model. The model is, receiving requires justification. Good things are conditional on performance. The open hand is an invitation to disappointment because the open hand means you were hoping, and hope is what makes the disappointment possible when the good thing is taken. The safest configuration is the hand that is slightly closed, the hoping that is slightly managed, the desire that is slightly muted so that the lack of arrival does not fully register as loss. The body learned this model not from one lesson, but from the repetition that makes something feel like truth. And by the time it reached adulthood, it was not a model anymore. It was simply the way things were, the assumption beneath the assumptions, the structure inside which all other thinking happened. The adult who carries this wound does not remember the lessons. They would not trace their difficulty receiving luck to a series of ordinary childhood moments about managing expectations. They simply experience the world as a place where luck has conditions, where receiving requires justification, where the open hand is exposure, and they bring every strategy, every attraction practice, every visualization, every affirmation to a system that is built on that model. And the strategy operates inside the model rather than beneath it, and the model holds. Let us look at how the wound operates now. In the present, in adult circumstances, in the situations where you have noticed the gap between luck arriving near you and luck landing. The first operational mode is self-sabotage. Luck arrives. The receiving layer, sometimes despite everything, opens. The body accepts the arrival. Partially, incompletely, but enough. The mind processes. This is real. This is happening. This could be it. And then something changes. Not a decision. Not a deliberate choice to undermine what arrived. Something that looks, in retrospect, like laziness or carelessness or a strange failure of follow-through that you cannot quite explain. The email that should have been sent within a day does not get sent for a week, and by then, the moment has passed. The relationship that was developing encounters a conversation that should not have happened at that particular time in that particular way. The money that arrived is spent before it can compound on things that felt necessary in the moment and feel, in retrospect, like another instance of the same inexplicable pattern. From the outside, this looks like self-destruction. From the inside, below the conscious level, it is something simpler and more loyal than that. It is completion. The wound expected this arrival to end. The ending was always part of the pattern. The body, faithful to the pattern, created the conditions for the expected ending. And when the ending arrived, when the opportunity passed, when the relationship foundered, when the money was gone, there was something in the system that recognized it. That felt, on some level, like, yes, this is how it goes. This is what I knew. And the floor resets. And the next arrival begins at the same level as the last one. Because the wound got its ending, and the floor returned to what it knows as home. The second operational mode is incomplete reception. This one is subtler and, in some ways, harder to work with because it does not produce the visible drama of self-sabotage. Luck arrives. The body partially accepts it. The mind acknowledges it. That was good. That was lucky. I can see that. But the full receiving, The embodied settling of this is mine. This is real. This changes something about the configuration of my life. Never happens. The luck lands in the space between almost received and fully held. It raises the resonance floor by a fraction. And then the fraction dissipates because it was never fully integrated, and the floor settles back to where it was. This is the person who has good things happen and still feels, persistently, like they are waiting for their luck to change. They can list the good things. They are not ungrateful. In the explicit, conscious sense of gratitude, they are often highly developed. They see the good. They acknowledge it. But it does not integrate. It does not raise the floor. It does not compound. Because the full reception, the surrendering into the arrival, the allowing of the good thing to change your self-concept, to shift the resonance floor, to close the feedback loop with the field, requires more than acknowledgement. It requires the body to receive, not just the mind to process. And the wound, operating below the mind's level, prevents the body from going all the way. The third operational mode is the cognitive override. Luck arrives. The body is on the verge of receiving it. The field has reached the receiver. The moment of integration is available. And the mind, smart, analytical, committed to accuracy, steps in. Coincidence. Circumstance. It would have happened anyway. It was not really lucky. It was positioned well. Anyone in that situation would have gotten the same result. It is just how things happened. The mind does not do this out of malice. It does not even do it out of fear. It does it out of a genuine commitment to not being the kind of person who attributes outcomes to magic or cosmic intervention or luck in the fuzzy, non-causal sense. It is trying to be an accurate narrator of the experience, and in being an accurate narrator, it prevents integration. Because integration requires the body to receive the luck as signal response, as the field meeting the receiver. And the mind, in its accuracy, removes the signal response interpretation before the body can complete the reception. The wound does not even have to fire in this mode. The wound just had to do its work early enough, long enough ago, that the mind learned to not trust the body's initial registration of luck as real, as available, as belonging to you. You may recognize your primary mode from those three. The recognition itself is worth something, not because naming a pattern dissolves it, but because an unnamed pattern has no edges. A pattern without edges cannot be worked with. The moment you can see it, you have gained the first thing you need, a relationship with it that is different from the relationship of simply being inside it. Now, let us return to the beginning. The flinch before something good arrives, the tightening behind the sternum right when it is actually arriving. The sensation that was named at the very opening of this audio, before anything was explained, before any concept was introduced. The listener now has the complete picture. The flinch is, the wound is, the deflection mechanism is the pattern. Not a personality trait, not a permanent feature of who you are. A learned response, and one that was, when it was learned, entirely sensible. One that has been running on the settings it was given before the mind was old enough to evaluate whether those settings were still warranted. The body that is flinching is not broken. It is faithful. Faithful to a reality that no longer exists. The only thing it needs to hear, in a language it actually trusts, is, we are not there anymore. This is the center of the difficulty. Not the luck, not the field, not the frequency or the resonance floor or the receiving layer. This, a part of you that is still protecting you from something that stopped threatening you a long time ago. There is nothing wrong with that protection. It is extraordinary, actually, how loyal the body is, how completely it commits to keeping you safe, how thorough its memory is, how little it lets you forget what it learned. The only question, and it is a gentle one, is whether it knows that the keeping is no longer necessary. whether it has been shown a different ending, whether the wound has ever had the experience of receiving, fully, without interruption, without the correction, without the aftermath it expected, and discovering that the sky stayed where it was, that nothing was taken, that the reception was simply received. What heals this is not understanding it. Understanding is only the first thing. What heals it is the body receiving, even once, and not being punished, receiving, and the sky staying where it is, good arriving, and nothing being taken. The wound does not close from the mind. It closes from experience, and the experience can begin before the circumstances change. Part 3. VHE Receiving Layer. Chapter 7. Opening VHE Receiving Layer. Every tradition that has ever addressed luck, manifestation, abundance, or the relationship between a human life and the generative principle of the world has focused overwhelmingly on the sending side of the equation. What you ask for, what you intend, the clarity of your desire, the quality of your expectation, the specificity of your visualization, the emotional frequency of your gratitude. Sending. All of it. An enormous body of human wisdom, accumulated across millennia, devoted almost entirely to the question of how to transmit more effectively toward the field. And this is not useless. The sending side matters. The quality of intention, the clarity of desire, the genuine expectation of receiving. These things are real, and they have real effects. But they are only half the equation. They are the half that has been endlessly examined, refined, optimized. And the other half, the receiving side, has been almost entirely ignored. Not because it is unimportant, because it is less visible. Because it happens below the level at which most strategies operate. Because you cannot see it from the outside, the way you can see a prayer or a visualization or a gratitude practice. The receiving layer is the functional description of the part of the system that determines what actually lands when something good arrives. It is not a metaphor. It is not spiritual language for something that cannot be otherwise described. It is the name for a real mechanism, the real variable that has been overlooked in the architecture of luck. You can have a perfect signal. You can be asking for exactly the right thing in exactly the right way with exactly the right emotional quality and exactly the right frequency. And if the receiving layer is closed, the signal passes through. The field does not withhold. The receiver blocks. Here is an image that carries this. An open hand and a fist. A fist can want things desperately. It can reach for things. It can push toward things. It can close around things so tightly that nothing could remove them by force. But it cannot hold things that arrive gently. It cannot catch things that are offered freely. It cannot receive. Most people working with luck, manifestation, or attraction are reaching with a fist, wanting hard, intending precisely, clarifying the desire until it is sharp enough to cut. And when luck arrives, the fist cannot hold it. Not because the person is deficient in some way, because of the shape of the reaching. Because the reaching is configured for grasping rather than receiving. Because the very intensity of the want has closed the hand. The receiving layer is the open hand, not passive. This is important. Receptive is not the same as inactive. An open hand is not a slack, indifferent hand. It is a hand that is oriented toward what arrives rather than toward what is wanted. A hand that is ready to hold what comes rather than reaching toward what is not yet here. The difference between the open hand and the fist is not effort. The fist takes more effort, not less. The open hand is the relaxation of a particular kind of muscular tension. The tension of trying to control the field rather than receive from it. Now, how does the receiving layer open? Not through technique, not through a practice you can perform in the morning and sustain through the day by effort. The receiving layer opens through orientation, a shift in the body's fundamental posture toward what is arriving, not toward what is desired, not toward what might come, but toward what is here. There are 3 orientations that create the conditions for the receiving layer to open. They are not steps in a sequence. They are not stages you pass through in order. They are simultaneous qualities. Qualities that, when they are present together, produce the state in which the receiving layer is open and the field can reach the receiver. The first orientation is permission, the body's decision. Not the mind's decision, the body's decision, that it is allowed to receive. Not that it deserves to. Not that it has earned the right. Not that it meets some standard of worthiness that would justify reception. Simply allowed. This is the most fundamental orientation and the most subtle. It is the one that the wound most directly prevents. The wound, as we have named it, says, receiving requires justification. Without justification, receiving is exposure. And the body has been running that instruction for so long that the absence of justification feels like danger. Permission is not the argument against that instruction. Permission does not say, you have done enough, you have earned it, the justification has been satisfied. Permission says something simpler and more radical. That is not what determines reception. Receiving is not conditional on justification. The field does not invoice. What permission sounds and feels like in the body, not in the mind. The mind can say the words without the body receiving anything, is not a grand statement of worthiness. It is subtler than that. It is something like, this is possible for me. Or even more minimally, I am not going to stop this from arriving. Not a claim. Not an assertion. A stepping aside. A slight relaxation of the holding. That relaxation, the body's permission, is the first condition of the receiving layer opening. The second orientation is presence. The receiving layer opens in the moment the luck arrives, not in the memory of luck, not in the anticipation of luck, in the moment. And the moment is only available to the one who is in it. This sounds obvious. It is not simple. Most people, when luck is arriving, are already somewhere else, already in the future. What does this mean? Where does this lead? What comes next? What if it does not last? How do I build on this? What am I supposed to do with it? Already in the past. Why did this not come sooner? What has this absence cost me? What does the timing of this arrival say about what came before it? Neither the future nor the past is the moment, and the receiving layer opens in the moment. Luck passes through a receiving layer that is occupied with the future or the past without landing, not dramatically, not with any obvious signal that it has been missed. It simply does not compound. It does not raise the floor. It does not close the feedback loop. Presence is not mindfulness in the technique sense. It is not a practice you can install and maintain. It is a recognition that the moment you are in is the only moment that contains what is arriving, and that anything other than being in that moment is a way of not being there when luck lands. The third orientation is recognition, not retroactive recognition, real-time recognition, naming the luck, even internally, even silently, even briefly, while it is happening. This orientation is the most practically significant because it is the most immediately available. You cannot always access permission. The wound is sometimes too loud, the holding too reflexive. You cannot always achieve presence. The mind is sometimes too active, the pull toward future and past too strong. But recognition is possible, even when permission is incomplete and presence is partial, because recognition happens in language, even internal language, and the act of naming. This is lucky. This is the field responding. This is what arrival looks like. Changes something in the system. It does not allow the mind to immediately file the event as coincidence. It creates a brief window in which the body is still in the event and the mind has been given a different instruction about how to categorize it. The window is brief, but the window is everything. Because in that window, even a few seconds, the floor moves. The feedback loop begins to close. The field gets a response. The receiver is here. The receiver is noticing. The receiver is open. And the field, which responds to tuning rather than to wanting, amplifies in the direction of an open and noticing receiver. Most luck that arrives is never fully received, not because the body rejects it. The body receives much more than the mind gives it credit for, but because the mind is already elsewhere when it lands, already in the consequence, the doubt, the next want. The luck passes through the receiving layer and hits the ceiling of the mind before it integrates. And so it does not compound. And so the floor does not rise. And so it feels, from the outside, like luck keeps almost arriving, and not quite. Before you can compound luck, you must be present for it. Not mindfully, not effortfully, simply in the room where it is arriving, rather than in the room you are building around what it might mean. Presence is the part no one teaches. Not because it is mysterious, because it cannot be taught as technique. It can only be understood as necessity, and then practiced in the moment, each time, as if for the first time. Chapter EIT, THE Practice OF Recognition. Here is the claim that this chapter is built on, stated plainly so nothing is obscured. Lucky people are not people to whom more good things happen. They are people who notice more of what happens. This is not a subtle distinction dressed up to sound important. It is the mechanism. It is the actual architecture of how consistently lucky lives differ from inconsistently lucky ones. Recognition is the feedback loop that closes between the receiver and the field. Without it, luck events are isolated, each one a discrete occurrence with no cumulative effect. With it, they become a signal, a pattern, a conversation between the receiver and what is being broadcast. The field reads, the receiver is present. The receiver is registering. The receiver is open. And the field, which does not respond to wanting, which responds to tuning, amplifies in the direction of an open and registering receiver. Not because of mystical reciprocity, not because the universe rewards the grateful, because a nervous system that is recognizing luck is, in that moment, a nervous system with a raised resonance floor, lowered noise, and open receiving layer. All three conditions simultaneously present. Of course, more luck arrives in that state. A clear receiver in a high-signal environment catches more signal. This is not mystical. This is basic mechanics. Let us trace the feedback loop in both directions, because the contrast reveals the mechanism more clearly than the mechanism described alone. The lucky version of the loop. What you recognize, you attune to. The luck event that is named, even briefly, even internally, creates an attunement. The receiver has been told, in the language it understands, that this is real, that this is what arrival looks like, that this is what the field sounds like when it reaches you. What you attune to, you become sensitive to. The receiver that has been told what to listen for becomes better at hearing it. What you are sensitive to, you notice more of. The receiver that is sensitive to the signal catches more of the signal. What you notice more of, you receive more of. The floor rises with each reception. The receiver becomes more naturally open. What you receive more of, you are more likely to recognize. The loop closes and accelerates. This is what a lucky streak looks like from the inside. Not the feeling of being chosen. The feeling of a loop that is running in the right direction. Each recognition event makes the next one slightly easier. The floor rises slightly with each held reception. The receiver becomes slightly more naturally tuned. And from the outside, It looks like luck has decided to be generous. The unlucky version of the same loop. What you do not recognize as luck, you do not attune to. The luck event that is filed as coincidence, or explained away, or noticed briefly and then forgotten, does not create an attunement. The receiver has not been told that this is what arrival sounds like. It does not calibrate. What you do not attune to, you do not become sensitive to. The receiver that has not calibrated does not improve its sensitivity. What you are not sensitive to, you do not notice. The luck continues to arrive. The field is broadcasting constantly, but the receiver is not oriented to catch it. What you do not notice, you do not receive. The floor stays where it is. The receiving layer stays at its current aperture, and from the inside, it feels like luck is absent, like the field is not broadcasting in your direction. You call this being unlucky. This confusion between unlucky and unrecognizing is perhaps the most important confusion this audio can help with, because it changes what the work is. If the problem is unlucky, if luck is actually not arriving, then the work is to generate it, to attract it, to improve the sending so the field gives more. And that is the direction most strategies go. But if the problem is unrecognizing, if the luck is arriving and is not being caught because the feedback loop is not closing, then the work is entirely different. The work is to improve reception, to calibrate the receiver, to close the feedback loop by naming what arrives, to reduce the attribution noise that explains luck away before it can integrate. The work is not to send better. The work is to notice more. Now let us look at what this looks like in practice, not as instruction, but as description of what people who compound luck naturally do. The first moment is in the body before the mind. Consistently lucky people often register something as lucky before they consciously identify it as such. There is a settling in the chest, a quality of ease, a sense of something fitting that arrives before the narrative about why it fits. The body recognizes first. The mind names it afterward. Most people have the sequence reversed. They wait for the mind to evaluate whether something counts as luck, whether it meets the threshold of significance, whether it is real enough and large enough and non-coincidental enough to be named, before allowing the body to receive it. And by the time the mind finishes evaluating, the window has often closed. The event has been processed and moved past. The body is no longer in it. The floor cannot rise in retrospect. The training, if it can be called that, since training implies a deliberateness this requires more than, is to practice letting the body register first, to notice the settling before the evaluation, to allow the sense of something fitting to be enough even before the narrative about it is complete. The body first, always. The second moment is in real time, as the event is happening. Name it, even internally, even in a single silent word, while you are still in the event. Not 3 days later when you are telling someone about it. Not in the retrospective gratitude journal. Now, while it is happening, while the body is still in it. The nervous system is still in the event when you name it in real time. The floor rises while the event is occurring. The feedback loop closes while the event is occurring. The recognition is integrated into the experience itself rather than applied to the memory of it. And integrated recognition compounds. Memory recognition is better than nothing. It can still raise the floor, still attune the receiver, but it is much less effective than in-event recognition. The recognition does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be a full pause or a ritual of gratitude or a moment of visible reverence. It can be as simple as a brief, quiet, internal. This is it. This is lucky. The field is here. 1 second of true acknowledgement, while the body is still in the event, is worth more for the feedback loop than 20 minutes of retroactive gratitude journaling. The third moment is in the aftermath, as integration. The final piece of the recognition practice is the willingness to stay in the good feeling slightly longer than feels comfortable. Not to analyze it, not to plan around it, not to immediately move to what comes next, what this means, what you should do with it. To stay. The discomfort of staying is the wound's signature. It is the body's signal that receiving fully, lingering in the good, letting it settle, not immediately returning to baseline, is exposure. The instinct is to move, to process and move on, to file the luck event and orient toward the next thing. The filing is the deflection mechanism's most socially acceptable face. Not dramatic enough to look like sabotage, not intellectual enough to look like attribution error, simply the natural movement away from what has arrived toward what comes next. Staying. Even briefly, even slightly past the point of comfort, is the new ending the wound needs. Each time you stay slightly longer than the wound's protocol, you are giving the body a different data point. Not that receiving is safe in some grand sense. Not that the world has changed. Simply that this moment of reception did not end in punishment. That the staying was possible. That nothing was taken in the staying. The wound updates from experience. One data point is not enough. The wound has years of data pointing the other way, but each data point of safe reception, each time the staying happened and the sky remained where it was, is data in the other direction. And the body, as loyal to its updated history as to its original history, will eventually update the floor. Chapter 9. Blessed beyond change, he state. Everything has been moving toward this, not as a destination. You will hear why that framing is wrong in a moment, but as a convergence. A point where everything that has been laid out separately becomes a single, unified thing. From part 1, luck is a relationship with the field, not a random event. The relationship has a structure: receiving, holding, compounding. The structure lives in the receiving layer and the resonance floor, not in the quality of the sending or the frequency of the asking. From part 2, the field is always broadcasting. What varies is the signal-to-noise ratio in the receiver. The noise has a root, the luck-worthiness wound, the body's decision that receiving required justification. That decision was made in a specific context. It was the right response to that context. It has been running past its useful life. From part 3, the receiving layer opens through permission, presence, and recognition. The feedback loop that closes between the receiver and the field, through real-time recognition, through staying in the arrival, through the body-first sequence, is what actually compounds luck, not the intensity of wanting, not the precision of the ask, the quality of reception. All of it points to one thing: not a technique, not a practice, not a next step or a strategy or an optimization of what you have already been doing. A state. The original frequency. The state that was there before the noise. What you were before the wound learned its protection, before the deflection reflex became automatic, before the resonance floor settled at the level that felt like home, even though it was not what you were built for. The original frequency is not something to achieve. It is something to return to. And the return, which is what we have been mapping throughout this entire audio, is not a single arrival. It is a direction. It is the consistent movement toward a configuration of the system that is more permeable than the current one, more present, more capable of real-time recognition, more willing to stay in the arrival long enough for the floor to move. What the state feels like. And this is worth describing carefully, because it is not what most people imagine luck would feel like. Is not euphoria, not certainty, not constant good fortune or the feeling of being in the universe's favor in some emotionally elevated sense. It is settledness, a quality of settledness that coexists with not knowing. The events can still be uncertain. The circumstances can still be in flux. The future can be as opaque and unknowable as it has always been. But something beneath the events is stable. An orientation. The world is organized in my favor, even in the moments when I cannot see how. Not as a belief that can be argued with. As a body sense. As the thing the nervous system returns to when there is no particular reason to return to anything. Think about those clear signal days. The days when things were flowing, when the noise was low, when the coincidences stacked and the doors opened and you felt, strangely and specifically, like the world was cooperating rather than resisting. That quality, that feeling of the world cooperating, is the feeling of the original frequency accessible. The state of being blessed beyond change is that quality made structural, made durable. Not dependent on the noise staying low, because the noise will rise again. Not dependent on circumstances being favorable, because circumstances change. Able to persist even through the noise, even through the setback, even through the dry period, because the floor is now high enough that the noise cannot pull the body all the way back down to bracing. This is not optimism. Optimism requires things to go well to sustain itself. Optimism is a position about the future, that the future will be good, or at least better than the current situation suggests. And when the future is not good, optimism is challenged. It has to work hard to maintain itself. It requires effort. The state of being blessed beyond change is not a position about the future. It is a frequency in the present. It does not require the future to be good because it does not depend on the future at all. It is what is available in this moment, in the current configuration of the receiver, in the current orientation of the system. When the future is uncertain, which it always is, the state does not destabilize. It deepens. Because the blessed state was never about the future. It was always about what you are in relationship with right now. And right now, the field is broadcasting. And the receiver, cleared of some portion of its noise, is more able to catch it than it was. Let us be precise about the difference between lucky and blessed. The distinction matters enormously. Lucky, things go well. Lucky is a description of events. It is episodic and circumstantial. It requires good events to sustain it. Blessed beyond change, operating from a frequency that makes good things more likely and that holds when they do not come. Blessed is a description of state. It is structural and continuous. It does not require good events. It generates the conditions for them. The lucky person loses their luck when circumstances turn. The turn lowers the floor, raises the noise, closes the receiving layer. The luck stops arriving. Or rather, the signal stops being caught. And the lucky streak ends. From the outside, it looks like luck left. From the inside, it is the floor returning to baseline after the compound effect ran out. The person who is blessed beyond change does not lose the frequency when circumstances turn. They may lose the pattern of good events temporarily. The dry period is real. We will be honest about that in the next chapter. But the state persists. The orientation holds. The receiver, even if partially closed by the noise the setback generates, does not close completely. It holds enough aperture for the signal to get through, eventually. And because the state persists, because the orientation does not collapse with the circumstances, the pattern of good events returns. Not because of wishful thinking, because the receiver stayed open enough for the field to reach it, even in the silence. What does the beyond change part actually cost? It costs the belief that luck is something that happens to you. The belief that you are acted upon by fortune, that you are in the position of the recipient of an external distribution, either favored or not favored, either in the blessed column or not. That belief has to go. Not violently. Not through a dramatic repudiation of everything you have believed. Gradually, through the accumulation of a different experience. The experience of being the variable, the receiver that determines what lands. the one who compounds or returns, the one who stays or moves away from the arrival before it integrates. It costs the victim position. And the victim position, while it is a cost to give up, also has a comfort in it that is worth naming honestly. If luck is something that happens to you, then the luck gap is not your responsibility. The proximity is not something you participated in creating. The almost is something the field did to you. And there is a relief in that. A relief that the gap is not yours to close, that you are not the variable, that it is the universe's fault and not yours. What we have been building here does not place blame. Mechanism is not blame. The deflection reflex is not your fault. It was built from experience that was not your choice. The wound is not your fault. It formed in a context you did not design. The resonance floor is where it is because of a history that happened to you. And you are the receiver. You are the variable. You are the one who holds or returns, who recognizes or explains away, who stays in the arrival or moves immediately to the next thing. Not because you created the current configuration, because the configuration is in you, and configurations can change. The daily maintenance of the blessed state is not effortful attraction. It is the daily small acts. Recognition, presence, permission, the willingness to stay in the arrival slightly longer than the wound's protocol allows. The willingness to name the luck in real time. The willingness to let the body receive first and the mind evaluate afterward. These are not extraordinary practices. They do not require a meditation retreat or a complete overhauling of your life or a decade of inner work. They require attention to what is already arriving. The readiness to be in the room when luck lands. For the person who has been watching luck land near them for years, who knows exactly what it looks like, who has the specific tiredness of close but not arriving. The proximity was not cruelty. The proximity was the field calibrating. Each almost was a frequency event, not a failure, a tuning, the signal getting closer, the receiver becoming more specific about what it was receiving toward, the abundance membrane getting thinner with each approach, not thicker. You are closer than you have ever been, not because of effort, not specifically because of this audio, because you have been almost long enough that the body has been calibrated by the proximity itself. You know exactly what you are receiving toward. You have been standing at the membrane long enough that crossing it is. Not someday, not when you have done more work, not when circumstances are better. The next available move. There is one more layer. Not the understanding, not even the state. The moment when the state begins to compound on itself, when being blessed is no longer something you return to but something you broadcast, when the original frequency is no longer the frequency you are reaching for but the frequency you are. When luck is not something that happens to you, but something that happens from you, from the quality of presence you bring into every room, every moment, every arrival. That is what Part 4 is about. Part 4. BLest, Beyond Change. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Once the receiving layer is open, even partially, even imperfectly, and recognition is active, even inconsistently, even incompletely, luck begins to compound. Not because more luck arrives in some absolute sense, though the increased attunement and the raised floor do make more of the signal catchable. More importantly, because more is held. Because the deflection reflex fires less quickly. Because the window of full reception stays open slightly longer. Because the floor moves with each held arrival rather than resetting after each one. Each held luck event raises the resonance floor slightly. The raised floor makes the next reception easier. The body has less distance to travel to reach the open hand posture. The easier reception makes recognition more natural. The receiver is more sensitive, the signal more audible. Natural recognition closes the feedback loop faster. The field gets its confirmation and amplifies. The faster feedback loop begins to produce the compound effect. This is what lucky streaks actually are. Not a temporary gift. Not an episode of cosmic generosity. A resonance floor that has risen above a threshold. Usually triggered by a single recognition event that was held fully, that stayed long enough to settle into the system, that raised the floor enough to make the next event easier to receive, and the compound effect beginning. The streak continues until something lowers the floor again. A setback. A disappointment. The return of an old noise pattern. The wounds protocol firing in response to something that triggered the original context. The floor drops. The loop begins to run in the other direction. The streak ends. And this, the ending of the streak, the return to baseline, is where the concept of being blessed beyond change is actually tested. Not in the streak. In the aftermath of the streak. In whether the floor, having been high, can be returned to something approaching that height more quickly than it was the first time. In whether the body, having experienced the compound effect, can recognize the difference between the floor and the streak ending and hold on to the floor even as the streak ends. Think about compound interest. A small amount deposited and left. Not touched, not withdrawn, simply left. Grows. Slowly at first. Then, past a threshold, in a way that becomes self-amplifying. The interest earns interest. The growth accelerates without additional input. The deposit compounds. The same amount, withdrawn immediately after each interest payment, does not compound. It stays small. The principal might even grow slightly over time. But the exponential effect, the effect that makes compound interest the most powerful force in economics, the thing that Albert Einstein reputedly called the eighth wonder of the world. That effect requires the deposit to stay. Luck is identical in its mechanics. The field does not prefer people who receive large luck events. It amplifies in the direction of people who hold what arrives. The lucky streak is compounding luck. Each event leaving a small residue of raised floor and refined attunement that makes the next event more likely to land and more likely to stay. The person who has been calling themselves unlucky, who has a list of almost arrivals and near misses and opportunities that came close but did not hold, has had the deposits, has not held them, has processed each event back to the original baseline, has started over, repeatedly, from the same floor. Not because the field was withholding, because the withdrawal happened before compounding could begin. What does holding look like for someone who has been returning? The first behavior is full reception, staying in the good feeling slightly longer than feels comfortable, not analyzing it, not planning around it, not immediately orienting toward what comes next, what this means, how to build on it. Just staying. The length of time is not the point. It is not about a specific duration, not 5 minutes of deliberate gratitude or 10 breaths of conscious appreciation. It is about the quality of the staying, whether the body is still in the event or has already moved to the processing of the event, whether you are receiving or narrating the receipt. The discomfort of full reception is real. The wounds protocol creates a physical sensation, an urge to move, to process and file and orient toward what comes next, to not linger in the arrival, because lingering is the kind of hoping that hurts when the arrival ends. That discomfort is the signal, not the instruction. The instruction is, stay. Slightly past the discomfort, long enough for the floor to register the arrival and move. Each time you stay past the discomfort, you give the wound a new data point. Nothing bad happened in the staying. The staying was possible. The reception did not end in punishment. And the wound, which updates from experience, files the data point. Slowly, incrementally, one data point at a time. But it files it. The second behavior is acknowledgement, speaking the luck. Even once, even quietly, even only to yourself. Not performing gratitude, not generating a feeling of appreciation for strategic purposes, simply naming it. That was lucky. That arrived exactly when it needed to. The field came through. Something worked in my favor there. The verbalization is not magical. It is a forcing function for full recognition. It is harder to dismiss something you have heard yourself name. The mind that has said, even internally, that was lucky, has given itself a different instruction about how to categorize the event than the mind that remained silent and allowed the event to be absorbed into the ongoing narration of circumstances. What is named is less likely to be filed as coincidence. What is not filed as coincidence is more likely to be integrated. What is integrated raises the floor. The floor raised by integration does not reset as quickly as the floor raised by unintegrated event. The integration is what creates durability in the compound effect. The third behavior is the orientation update, using each luck event to update the fundamental operating assumption, not as affirmation, not as the repetition of a positive statement intended to create a feeling, as data processing. As the body registering, this happened. This is evidence of how the field responds to this receiver. The evidence updates the orientation. This is the mechanism by which the resonance floor rises permanently rather than temporarily. Each luck event that is fully received, acknowledged, and used to update the orientation is a permanent increment on the floor. Not a large increment, not dramatic, but permanent, accumulated over time, over the months and years of consistent recognition and holding. The permanent increments become the new home baseline. The floor that was once here is now here, not because something external changed, because the accumulation of held and integrated reception moved it. You have had lucky streaks that ended, not because luck stopped coming, because something lowered the floor. A worry, a doubt, a single setback that the wound recognized and used to confirm its original data, and the compound effect reversed. The good feeling was withdrawn before the interest could accumulate. The reception that was beginning to compound reverted to episodic. The question is not, when will my luck return? Luck has not left. The field is broadcasting. The question is, what happened in those streaks to the floor? And what would happen if, this time, when the streak encounters the setback that wants to end it, the floor held? What compounds in you? Over time, over events, over the accumulation of what was received and held and allowed to integrate, eventually becomes the frequency you broadcast without trying. Not the frequency you are reaching for, not the state you are deliberately maintaining, the frequency you are, the thing that other people are in the presence of when they are in the room with you, the thing that makes luck more likely to happen around you, not because you are trying to attract it, but because the field finds an open receiver in you and amplifies. That is the end point of this. Not success as event, not abundance as a series of lucky breaks, abundance as broadcast, luck as nature. Blessed not because things are going well. Blessed because that is the frequency your body knows is home. Chapter 11. WAN. Lushuk seems to stop. There are periods when nothing arrives. This audio would not be honest if it pretended otherwise. And honesty, genuine honesty, the kind that does not soften what is real, is more important here than comfort. The comfort that comes from pretending the dry period is not real is not comfort. It is insulation that eventually gives way, usually at the moment when you most need something solid. So let us be direct. There will be periods where nothing arrives, where the recognition practice feels hollow or forced or like self-deception, where staying in the good feeling is impossible because there is no good feeling to stay in, where the field feels silent in a way that is more than temporary, where the wound's original data, that hope is what makes disappointment possible, that it is better to not hope than to hope and find nothing arriving starts to feel like the most accurate thing you have ever heard. Those periods are real. What is different, after everything this audio has covered, is not that the dry period stops happening. It is what you understand the dry period to be. That understanding does not remove the difficulty. It changes the relationship with the difficulty. And the relationship with the difficulty is the variable that determines how long the floor drops and how quickly it can be restored. Here is what actually happens in a dry period at the level of mechanism. The first thing that happens is that the silence triggers the noise. The absence of luck events, even briefly, even for a few days, activates the vigilance noise. See, it was always going to end. I knew it was too good to be consistent. This is what happens when you get hopeful. I should not have trusted it. The wound, which has been collecting data for years about the conditionality of good things, takes the silence as confirmation. Of course it ended. This is what the evidence has always suggested would happen. The noise rises in response to the silence. The raised noise lowers the receiving capacity. The receiver becomes less open, the attunement less sensitive. Less is received, which means there is less arriving, or at least less landing, which confirms the noise, which raises the noise further, which lowers the receiving capacity further. This is the mechanism of the losing streak, not luck abandoning you. The silence triggering the noise that prevents reception, that confirms the silence, that deepens it. A self-amplifying loop, the exact inverse of the lucky streak's virtuous cycle. The second stage is the resonance floor dropping. A setback lowers the floor, not permanently. Not unless something intervenes to make the lowering permanent, which is the mechanism of serious demoralization, which is real and not to be dismissed. But in the ordinary dry period, the floor drops. The nervous system recalibrates its sense of what is normal. The calibration happens below awareness. The body simply, quietly, begins to expect less, to orient toward less, to hold less aperture in the receiving layer, because opening fully feels naive given the recent data. This new lower baseline is the most insidious part of the dry period, because it feels like realism. It feels like the appropriate adjustment to reality. It feels like the honest acknowledgement of what the evidence actually shows. And the evidence shows, in the dry period, by definition, that luck is not currently arriving. So holding a high floor feels, in the dry period, like denial. But it is not denial. The floor is the floor because of the accumulated history of the relationship with the field, not because of the current moment's data. The dry period is one moment in the relationship. Adjusting the floor to the dry period is like closing a savings account because of one bad week in the market. The third stage is the receiving layer closing in protection. Once the floor has lowered and the noise has risen, the final stage of the dry period is the body's protection response. Better not to hope. It hurts less. The receiving layer closes, not completely, but functionally. The body has decided that the cost of hoping, the exposure, the vulnerability of full reception, is too high given the recent evidence. And so the luck that has been broadcasting through the entire dry period, that has been trying to reach the receiver throughout the silence, now passes through a mostly closed receiver. And it feels, from the inside, like the field turned off. It did not turn off. The current was never interrupted. Only the reception was. Now, what does blessed beyond change mean in the context of this? In the dry period? When the floor is low and the noise is high and the receiving layer is functionally closed and the wound's data is louder than any other voice in the system? This is the test of the concept. Not the concept as described in the good times. The concept in the silence. Blessed beyond change is not the instruction to feel lucky when nothing good is happening. It is not the demand to feel grateful in the absence of things to be grateful for. It is not the toxic positivity of insisting on a high floor when the body is in the legitimate pain of a setback. It is something more difficult and more real than that. It is the maintenance of the relationship with the field, even when the relationship is not producing visible results. Not the maintenance of a feeling. Not the performance of luck or gratitude or confidence. The maintenance of the structural orientation. The body turned toward the field, even in the silence. The receiver not perfectly open, not at its best, not capable in this moment of the full reception of the lucky streak, but not fully closed either, not shut down, not convinced by the dry period that the field has turned away. The only action available in a dry period is not to try harder. Trying harder in a dry period increases the noise. The wanting harder, the visualization harder, the affirmation harder. These are all increases in broadcast, in sending, at a time when the problem is reception. They add noise. They do not reduce it. The only action available is to reduce noise where possible, to maintain the receiving orientation even without feedback, to keep the floor as high as possible, given the difficulty of the moment, by recognizing whatever is available. However small, however ordinary, however far from what you were hoping for. The message that arrived from an unexpected person. The moment of ease in an otherwise difficult day. The thing that did not go wrong when it could have. Not gratitude practice in the performative sense. Recognition in the structural sense. Closing whatever portion of the feedback loop is available to close, even when the signal is weak. Keeping the floor from dropping all the way. Keeping the receiving layer from closing completely. Because the floor that holds in the silence is the floor that catches the next arrival. Return to the opening. The flinch. In the dry period, the flinch is constant. The body is bracing against an arrival that is not coming. The protection mechanism that originally fired when good things arrived. That was designed to manage the vulnerability of full reception, is now running continuously in the absence of good things. Running preemptively. As if the body has decided to begin deflecting before there is anything to deflect. And the preemptive bracing. The body held in the half-closed posture of the dry period, neither fully shut nor fully open, is one of the conditions that extends the silence. Not the only condition, but a meaningful one. The luck was never missing, only the frequency that calls it by name. It is not a small thing to maintain your orientation in the silence, to keep the receiver open when the signal feels absent, to lower the noise when the noise is being fed by the very silence it is generating. This is the most advanced work in this entire teaching. Not the theory, not the recognition practice, not the mechanics of compounding. This, choosing to stay open when staying open has no immediate reward. When the wound is loud, when the evidence seems to say, this is what I knew was true. When the floor wants to drop and the receiver wants to close and the oldest protection pattern wants to run. The people who compound luck across years, not who are always lucky, but who return to luck faster after the dry period ends, who do not let the setback reset the floor all the way, have developed this capacity, not through discipline or willpower or exceptional spiritual development, through having been here before, through knowing at the floor level that the signal returns, that the dry period is not the permanent state, that the silence is noise rising above the signal threshold, not the signal ceasing. That is what the dry period is for, not punishment. Evidence. The evidence that the floor can hold even in the silence, and the floor that holds in the silence. The floor that does not drop all the way, even when the noise is loud and the wound is confirmed and the receiving layer is struggling to stay open. That floor is higher after the dry period than it was before it began. What waits on the other side of the silence is not luck returning to someone who waited long enough. It is your relationship with the field having clarified. The silence burned away what was conditional. The luck that depended on the streak continuing to feel like luck. That was always episodic. The orientation that persisted through the silence. That is structural. That is the floor that does not reset. That is the relationship with the field that does not depend on the field currently returning visible results. That is what was always the point. Not the luck. The unconditionality. The capacity to be in relationship with the field, regardless of what the field is currently returning. The orientation that holds even in the silence. The receiver that stays open even when nothing is arriving. That is blessed, and it is beyond change. Chapter 12. DHE Return to THE Original Frequency. The original frequency is not something you create. It is something you return to. This entire audio has been a map of that return. Not a shortcut, not a technique. A map of the territory between where most people are operating. With the noise, with the wound, with the deflection reflex running on old settings, with the floor calibrated by accumulated history rather than by original capacity. And the original frequency. The broadcast that was always available. The state that was present before the protection was built. Part 1, named the structure. Luck is a relationship. The relationship has a mechanism. Receiving, holding, compounding. The mechanism lives in the receiving layer and the resonance floor, not in the quality of the wanting, in the quality of the reception. Part 2 named what covered the original frequency. The signal was always broadcasting. What accumulated was noise. The noise has specific sources. The unworthiness pattern, the vigilance running past its useful life, the attribution override that explains away what arrives before it can integrate. And beneath all the noise sources, one root. The experience in which the body learned that receiving required justification. The luck-worthiness wound, the place where the decision was made that the open hand was exposure. Part 3 named the path back. Not a path in the sense of a sequence to follow. A direction. The direction of less noise. Of more permission. Of presence in the moments when luck arrives rather than in the moments before and after it. Of recognition in real time. Of staying in the good slightly longer than the wound's protocol allows. Each of these is a small increment of return toward the original frequency. Part 4 showed what happens when the return gains enough ground that the compound effect begins. The streak that is not a streak, but a floor rising. The dry period that is not luck leaving, but noise temporarily exceeding the signal threshold. The capacity, built through experience, to hold the floor even in the silence. All of it points to one thing. Not a new frequency. This is the original one. The one that was present before anyone taught you that luck needed to be earned. Before the flinch. Before the floor settled where it settled. Before the wound decided that receiving was exposure. You were, before all of that, someone for whom the field was simply available. Not because of anything you had done. Not because of any quality you had developed or earned or demonstrated. Because of what you are. Because the receiver was clear. Because the noise had not yet accumulated. Because the orientation was natural before it had to be deliberate. That is what is available to return to, not through erasure. The wound is not erased. The history is not replaced. The noise that accumulated did so for real reasons in response to real experience, and it does not simply disappear because you understand it. The body does not work that way. The body changes from new experience, not from understanding alone. But the new experience has been happening throughout this audio. In the moments of recognition that occurred as you heard the mechanism named, those recognition events were themselves small receptions. The wound being shown something familiar from a different angle. The floor getting one data point in the other direction. The feedback loop closing briefly around the recognition itself. Not a transformation. An increment. And increments compound. Here is what blessed beyond change means, stated as simply and as completely as possible. It is not a destination. You do not arrive at it and stay there. It is a recognition. The recognition that what the world calls luck is not random. It is what happens when the receiver is clear and the signal finds it. And the receiver, your receiver, was always built to be clear. The noise that covered it was added. The wound that created the noise was earned through experience. The protection that the wound built was rational, given what the experience was. None of it was original. All of it was response. And response can update. The body that learned the flinch can learn the open hand. Not by forgetting the flinch. Not by overriding it. By giving the body enough new experience of safe reception that the flinch has less and less certainty to call on. By making the open hand as familiar as the flinch once was. More familiar, eventually, as the data accumulates. The floor that settled low can rise. Not through effort, not through willing it higher, through the accumulation of held receptions, through staying in the good long enough times, that the body updates its sense of what is normal, that the raised floor becomes home, that the flinch, which fires when the system is operating above home, fires at a higher and higher threshold as home moves. The receiving layer that closed in protection can open. Not because the world became safer. The world has not changed. But because the body has been shown, enough times, in enough moments, that receiving does not end in punishment. That the staying was possible. That the sky remained where it was. That the arrival was simply received. Each such data point makes the next reception slightly easier. The wound updates. The layer opens. This is all that was ever needed. Not a new frequency. The old one, uninterrupted. Now, come back to the body. Not to what was understood in this audio. Not to the concepts or the mechanisms or the language that has been building for 3 hours. To the physical. The sternum. The place where the tightening lives. Where the flinch happens. Where the body registers the arrival of good things with the holding in that is the wound's signature. Is it the same as when this audio began? Not as concept. Not as intellectual inquiry. As actual physical check. Is the tightening exactly as it was? Is the holding exactly as dense? There may be something fractionally different. Not transformed. Not healed. Fractionally different. A slight less of the holding. A slight more of the open. Something in the chest that is, perhaps, marginally less braced than it was an hour or 3 hours ago. That fraction is not nothing. That fraction is not a small thing dressed up as significant. That fraction is the receiving layer at the beginning of opening. That fraction is the resonance floor, one increment higher than it was. That fraction, recognized, named, held, allowed to be what it is the first compound. The frequency does not announce itself. It does not arrive with drama or with the feeling of something large having changed. It arrives the way light arrives in a room that has been dark for a long time. Not sudden, not dramatic, not even immediately obvious, just present. And then, after a moment, when the eyes have adjusted, when the initial surprise of not dark has settled into the experience of something ordinary and available, obvious, as if it was always going to be there, as if the dark was the interruption, not the light. One thing worth naming before the end, and it requires honesty rather than comfort. What this audio has not touched, because it cannot be touched in a single sitting, no matter how long, no matter how thorough, is the time it takes for the body to believe what the mind now sees. The gap between understanding and embodiment is real. The gap between knowing you are in relationship with the field and living as if you are. Between the intellectual comprehension of the mechanism and the somatic integration of it. The body actually changing its response to arrival. That gap is real. It is the place where this work actually lives, and it takes longer than a single sitting. You may finish this audio with genuine clarity, with the feeling of something having shifted, something having named, something having been seen that cannot quite be unseen. And you may find, in 3 days or 7 days or 3 weeks, that the noise is back, that the floor is low again, that the flinch has returned, that the wound's protocol is running as reliably as it ever did. That is not failure. That is not evidence that what was understood here was wrong or insufficient. That is the gap between the mind that sees and the body that believes. And that gap is closable. It closes in the moments of recognition, in the moments of staying in the good slightly longer, in the moments when luck arrives. In whatever form it arrives, in whatever size and shape and apparent significance. And you are in the room when it lands. And you name it. And you stay. And the floor moves one increment. Those moments are coming. They will be ordinary. They will be the size of a parking space, or an unexpected message, or a conversation that goes slightly better than it should have. They will not announce themselves as the moments that matter. They will look like coincidence or circumstance, or nothing in particular. And if you are present when they arrive, if the receiver is even partially open, even imperfectly, even with the noise still running in the background, they will be the door. Not someday. In whatever comes next. The luck was never missing. Only the frequency that calls it by name.